ready to get back into our Father's Word here at the chapel. We're going back into the law as we begin our study in the fourth book of Moses, also known as the book of Numbers. The actual name Numbers coming from the Greek, the Septuagint, and that being nothing more than man's idea or concept of what the book of Numbers is about. And most assuredly, we have a numbering. In fact, we have two numberings in the book of Numbers, chapter 1 through 3, the first numbering, and then in chapter 26, we have a numbering just before Israel goes into the Promised Land. And the actual name in the Hebrew language is Bamidbar, and it means in the wilderness. As the other books of Moses, make up the five that make up the Pentateuch, you find the name in the Hebrew in the first verse. Genesis, in the beginning. Exodus, these are the names. Book of Numbers, in the wilderness, and that is indeed how it starts out, Bamidbar. The fourth book of Moses, then biblical numerics, most of you know the number 4 has to do with earth. We have 4 directions, north, east, south, and west. We have 4 seasons in earth. And the types that we'll see in this fourth book of Moses, the book of Numbers, have to do with the wilderness. And if you do a comparison of the Psalms, you may recall in our study in the Psalms can be divided up into books that cover the subjects that the Pentateuch does as well. And Psalm 90 through Psalm 106, dealing with the fourth book of the Psalms, the Numbers book, if you will. The types having to do with wilderness, and also there are 4 examples of types for the Son of Man, Jesus Christ, in the book of Numbers. For in chapter 11, verses 7 through 9, we see Christ as the bread of life, the type for him there. In chapter 20, verse 1, we see the water, the living water, which Jesus is, of course, our Savior is. In chapter 21, verse 9, we have a situation there where the children of Israel asked for the king of Edom if they could cross through his land. He said, no, you can't cross through my land. You have to go around. So they were making their way around, and it was a very difficult way around by the Red Sea. And the people of Israel once again started complaining and murmuring, God, you and Moses brought us out in this wilderness to die. And then what happened? Well, God was so furious, he sent fiery serpents among the people of Israel, and those that were bitten died, many of them from the bite. And Moses once again interceded on behalf of the people of Israel, and God instructed him to make that brass serpent and raise it up, and those who would look upon that brass serpent would be saved. And there was one also raised up in John chapter 3, verse 14 and 15. You'll see that Jesus Christ also was raised up as he was crucified on that cross, and those who looked upon him were saved as well. That being the third type of Jesus Christ in this book. The final will be in chapter 24, verse 17, where we learn that star would come out of Jacob as prophesied, that star, the scepter bearer, if you will, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Jesus Christ. So, the book of Numbers, some might say that it's a difficult book. I don't think so. As the title indicates that there are numberings, yes, chapters 1 through 3, as I mentioned, and also chapter 26. But there's a lot of other things that are going on in the book of Numbers. And I think the thing to keep in mind is that this is the people that came out of Egypt. We're talking, as we began the book of Leviticus, which the two are very closely tied together, Leviticus and Numbers. They both begin with the word "and," indicating that they are a continuation of the work. And you can consider the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, as one, and should consider it that way. But from the beginning of Leviticus, you're at day 1 of the first month and the second year that Israel came out of Egypt. And as we go all the way through Numbers chapter 10, verse 10, we're only at the 20th day of the second month of the second year. So the entire book of Leviticus, the entire book of Numbers up to chapter 10, verse 10, occur within about a 45 to 50 day period. So a lot going on in Israel at this time. God is preparing the people to enter the promised land. That was His intent when He brought them out of the land of Egypt. And these people saw the Red Sea cross. They were the ones who crossed over on dry land and then turned around to watch the Egyptian army and Pharaoh's army completely annihilated by the waters of the Red Sea when it came crashing back down upon them. So do you think these people should have a little bit of faith? Well, I would think so, after He time and time again delivered them, feeding them manna in the wilderness, giving them water. Do you think they would have enough faith to believe our Heavenly Father when He said, it's a land that flows with milk and honey? I give you this promised land, and I'll go before you even and defeat your enemies and give you this promised land. Would they believe Him? Well, unfortunately, they don't. And when we get to chapter 14, you'll see that it gets to the point that it's out and out rebellion against God's plan, and as a result, the second numbering, I'll go ahead and clue you in this book in chapter 26, is almost after 40 years. And you know what that 40 years was? That was the 40 years that God said, I'm fed up with this people. Stand back away from them, Moses. I'm going to completely destroy them, and I'll build a better, bigger nation for you. And again, the intercessor that he was, fantastic, Moses stepping in and saying, Lord, don't destroy them. The people in Egypt will say, look, the Lord couldn't deliver His children into the promised land. But God at that point said, well, okay, I won't wipe them out, but here's the punishment. Not one of them is going to enter the promised land. And only Joshua and Caleb would, out of all these numberings, there are only 2 that would enter the promised land. So with that introduction, let's pick it up. As always, we ask that word of wisdom in Yeshua's precious name. Father, we ask you to open eyes, open ears, the book of, 4th book of Moses, the book of Numbers, chapter 1, verse 1, and it reads, And the Lord spake unto Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, in the tabernacle of the congregation, on the first day of the second month, in the second year after they were come out of the land of Egypt, saying, we're at 1490 BC at this time. And I mentioned we'll have 2 numberings in the book of Numbers. Actually, they are the second and third numbering that God ordered. For God ordered a numbering in Exodus chapter 30, verse 11 and 12. There would be a 4th numbering of Israel attempted, that ordered by David, but it wasn't God who told him to do it. Satan provoked him to do it, as it's written in 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 1. God wasn't pleased with David at all, because what David was doing was building his own ego. He was like, how many men do I have under me in my army? Was his attitude. And God sent the prophet Gad to David and said, you got your choice. 3 years of famine, 3 months of being pursued by your enemies. That wouldn't suit David's style at all. Or 3 days of the sword of the Lord, a pestilence. And David said, Lord, I can't choose from that. I throw myself and the people of Israel at your mercy. And that's when the sword of the Lord struck Israel and destroyed 70,000. That continued until David approached the threshing floor of Ornan, where the actual temple of Solomon was to be built, and God instructed him to build an altar there and offer sacrifice. That is where Solomon's temple would be built. And that tabernacle in the first chapter, don't think of some ornate, marble-floored, marble-pillared temple as the temple of Solomon's time. We're talking about the Mosaic tent here that God instructed that be constructed, instructions given to Moses in Exodus 25 and the following verses. Verse 2, take ye the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel. This word children, check it out, is ben in the Hebrew, and most of you know that that means sons. So the women and children weren't counted. It was just the sons, and we'll see it would be those who were 20 years old and older. In other words, fighting men. This is what this is a mustering of the troops to enter the promised land. By the house of their fathers, with the number of their names, every male by their polls. And a poll simply meaning a head. So what we're doing here is a head count. Verse 3, from 20 years old and upward, all that are able to go forth to war in Israel, thou and Aaron shall number them by their armies. Now, Aaron, it will be part of the second numbering in the book of Numbers, the first numbering in the book of Numbers, the second ordered by God, but he won't be part of the third numbering in chapter 26, for he will die in Mount Hor in chapter 20, and it will be Moses and Eleazar, the eldest surviving son of Aaron, when we get to chapter 26, who will conduct that numbering. Verse 4, and with you, that being Moses and Aaron, there shall be a man of every tribe, and every one head of the house of his fathers. So we have Moses and Aaron plus one tribe prince, you could think of it, or the head of each of the tribes, being 12, plus the 2 is 14. And the number 14 in numerics, biblical numerics, is deliverance or salvation. Verse 5, and these are the names of the men that shall stand with you. Of the tribe of Reuben, Eleazar, meaning God of the rock, the son of Shedeur, Shedeur meaning spreader of light. Now, notice, did these men volunteer, the 12 tribe princes? No, God named them, so we don't have any free will here. God chose those who would stand and help Moses and Aaron. Now, the order that the tribes are listed in here are by, for the most part, have to do with the mothers of the 12 patriarchs. All of them's father, of course, is Jacob, whose name was later changed to Israel by God, but there were several women responsible for birthing them. 5, the first 5, in fact, will be of Leah. Then come 3 by Rachel. Then we have 1 by Bilhah, 2 by Zilpah, and then 1 finally by Bilhah. So the names listed here mostly have to do with who was the mother of the patriarch. Verse 6, of Simeon, Shelumiel, which means peace of God, the son of Zerashaddah, which means rock of the Almighty. Of Judah, Nashon, the son of Amminadab. Nashon meaning enchanter, Amminadab, people of liberality. And this seed line of Nashon would be the seed through which the promise would come, leading up to the birth of David, which eventually led us to the birth of the second man, Adam, that, of course, being Jesus Christ. Verse 8, of Issachar, Nethaneel, the son of Zuar, Zuar meaning small, Nathaniel, a word that many of you are probably can figure out what part of that means because you're familiar with the Hebrew word Nethanim, Nathan or Nathan even being given, Nathaniel meaning given of God if you translate it rather than transliterate it. Verse 9, of Zebulun, Eliab, which means God of his father, the son of Helon. Helon means strong. Of the children of Joseph, of Ephraim, Elishama, God of hearing, the son of Amihud, meaning people of splendor, of Manasseh, Gamaliel, reward of God, and the son of Pedazur, Pedazur meaning rock, a rock has ransomed. And of course, Joseph given a double portion. You may recall Joseph being the one who basically saved Israel's bacon by his brothers sold him into bondage, and he ended up in Egypt. And lo and behold, he became the second most powerful man in Egypt. And if not for him, Israel probably would have starved to death. But when he passed away, both of his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, became one of the tribes of Israel. 11. Of Benjamin, Abidan, Abidan meaning father of judgment, the son of Gideoni, Gideoni meaning warlike. And the Benjamites were very warlike. They were good warriors, known to be excellent with the bow in archery. 12. Of Dan, Ahiezer, meaning brother of help, the son of Ammishaddai, Ammishaddai meaning people of the Almighty. And Ami, another Hebrew word many of you are familiar with from Hosea chapter 1 and 2. We learn there the difference between Ami, meaning my people, and Lo Ami, meaning not my people. Verse 13, of Asher, Pagiel, meaning accident of God, the son of Akran, Akran meaning a muddler, or one who makes a mess of things. Verse 14, of Gad, Eliasaph, meaning God is gatherer, the son of Duiel, Duiel meaning known of God. Now in chapter 2, verse 14, Duiel is mentioned again, but there he'll be called Ruiel. A common copyist error in the Hebrew language is confusing the resh, which is the R in the Hebrew language, and a delete, which is a D in the Hebrew language. And I think in chapter 10, he's even called Duiel again, so kind of alternating what he's called. Verse 15, of Naphtali, Ahira, meaning brother of wrong, the son of Enan, Enan meaning having eyes. Verse 16, these were the renowned of the congregation, princes of the tribes of their fathers, heads of thousands in Israel. And I remind you in verse 5, they didn't volunteer. God named them to help Moses and Aaron. Verse 17, and Moses and Aaron took these men which are expressed by their names, specified by their names. Now, Aaron, I'll remind you, at this point in time has already been chosen and, in fact, consecrated to be the high priest. That happened back in the book of Leviticus. The people of Israel came to Mount Sinai in the 3rd month of the 1st year. So there were almost a full year that they've been at Sinai at this time. Not quite, but almost. So there's quite a bit that has already happened. In fact, in Leviticus, God, leaving nothing to chance, organized the priesthood, that being the subject of the book of Leviticus. Now, in the book of Numbers, we see God organizing the civil leadership of the nation of Israel in preparation for them going into the promised land. So, and you remember when God chose Moses, to bring the people out of Egypt and into the promised land, Moses said, Lord, you've got the wrong fella. I'm slow of speech. And God said, okay, we'll use your older brother Aaron to be your mouthpiece, more or less, to be the high priest. And so that's how that came to be. Now, both Moses' authority and Aaron's authority are going to be challenged in the book of Numbers when we get to chapter 16 by their very own cousin, a man by the name of Korah, who challenged Aaron's right to the priesthood, the high priesthood, and also Moses' right to lead the nation as a whole on the civil aspects. 18, and they assembled all the congregation together on the first day of the second month, in other words, of the second year, I'll add, and they declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names from 20 years old and upward, by their polls, by their heads again. This word pedigree, check it out in the Hebrew, is yalad, and it means to show your lineage. In other words, the seed line of your family. And so evidently counting these up. And to remember, too, that a large number of people in a tribe was considered that they had received the blessings of God. If a tribe was diminished in number, it indicated that they weren't being blessed of God, and so that's kind of another thing to keep up with as we consider this numbering. Verse 19. As the Lord commanded Moses, so he numbered them in the wilderness of Sinai, and this to distinguish the numbering, this numbering from the numbering in chapter 26, which will be conducted in the plains of Moab almost 40 years later. 20. And the children of Reuben, Israel's eldest son, by their generations after their families, by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names, by their polls or heads, every male from 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go forth to war. Now, Reuben being the firstborn of Jacob, in fact, is the name Reuben means "see ye a son," and as it's written in the book of Genesis, Reuben defiled his father's bed. What happened was he uncovered his father's nakedness by sleeping with his father's concubine, Bilhah. And in chapter 49, verse 4, it states there, when Jacob was handing out the blessings to the various tribes, it states in chapter 49, verse 4 of Genesis, that Reuben lost his dignity, and therefore he will not have many in number here. Verse 21, those that were numbered of them, even of the tribes of Reuben, and Reuben, by the way, his mother was Leah, were 40,605. And when we get to chapter 26, it will be even less than that, at 43,730. Verse 22, and of the children of Simeon, Simeon means hearing, by their generations after their families, by the house of their fathers, those that were numbered of them, according to the number of the names, by their polls, every male from 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go forth to war. Simeon, a descendant of Leah as well. Now, Simeon was greatly diminished in Numbers chapter 26, verse 14, we'll see when we get there, because of sin. And in fact is in Deuteronomy chapter 33, where we have another listing, not a numbering, but a listing of the tribes of Israel. Moses excludes Simeon at that time. 23, those that were numbered of them, even of the tribe of Simeon, were 59,300. And in chapter 26, there will be less than half of that number, 22,000 200. Again, greatly diminished because of sin, completely left out in Deuteronomy 33. 24. Of the children of Gad, by their generations, after their families, by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names, from 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go forth to war. Now, Gad is an interesting word in the Hebrew. It's from, if you have a Strong's Concordance, it's from the Strong's word 1464 in the Hebrew dictionary, which is pronounced Gud rather than Gad, and it means to crowd upon or attack. I like the way Smith's Bible Dictionary chose to translate it as a troop. 25. Those that were numbered of them, even of the tribe of Gad, were 40,5,650. Interesting to note, Gad, the only one numbered down to the tens here. All the other tribes in this particular numbering, the counts are rounded off to 100. But here we have Gad down to the 50s. In chapter 26, it'll be 40,500. Now, this particular listing of the tribes, as we go through the numberings here, more on that when we get to chapter 2, but God leaves nothing to chance here, and He's organizing this. And what you have here, those first three tribes that we talked about here, Reuben, Simeon, and Gad, are one of the four camps of Israel, one of the four divisions, if you will, of the military. And it is Reuben who is the standard bearer, and as we will see, there are four standard bearers, that being Reuben, Judah, Dan, and Ephraim, and along with each of them, they'll each be assigned a position when the tabernacle comes to rest at a place of encampment. One of those four will be on the north, one on the south, one on the east, and one on the west. And that is the way that God set this up. Why did He set it up this way? Because it makes sense to have organization in your military. And it even gets to the point that when Israel sets forth, either to just march on to a different place of encampment or to even to go to war, then there's a certain sound of the silver trumpets that calls that particular camp to lead off and be in the lead. So more on that when we get to chapter 2. And very interesting things concerning God's throne, concerning that as well. When we get there, we'll be covering 26 as we continue with the second camp or division. That one will be led by Judah. Of the children of Judah, and Judah, by the way, means celebrated in the Hebrew language, by their generations, after their families, by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names, from 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go forth to war. Judah, also a descendant of Leah, was his mother. And the order here, again, by the four camps, not so much by the mothers. Those that were numbered of them, even of the tribe of Judah, were 314,600, and that number will grow to 76,500 in chapter 26, the largest tribe here, and will continue to be the largest tribe at the numbering in chapter 26. And I went to real extent to mention that we're not listing by mothers here, but it's also very interesting to note, I think, that the camps are divided up by the tribes based on who the mother of the patriarch was, to some extent. 28, and who was with Judah on their particular camp. There'll be two more tribes. Of the children of Issachar, by their generations, after their families, by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names, from 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go forth to war. Issachar, also a descendant of Leah, as Judah was. 29. Those that were numbered of them, even of the tribe of Issachar, were 50 and 4,400, and they will grow to 64,300 in about 39 years that transpass between now and chapter 26, when the next numbering. They grow by 9,900, being blessed, 30. Of the children of Zebulun, and Zebulun means habitation, by their generations after their families, by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names from 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go forth to war. Remember, this is all in preparation to enter the promised land. And indeed, it will be war. 31. Those that were numbered of them, even of the tribe of Zebulun, also of Leah, the mother of Zebulun was Leah, were 50 and 7,400, and that would grow to 60,500 by chapter 26. 32. And of the children of Joseph, these would be mothered by Rachel. Now, Rachel was the mother of Joseph. Namely, of the children of Ephraim, by their generations after their families, by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names from 20 years old and upward, all that were able to go forth to war. Now, Joseph, as I mentioned, received a double portion. In fact, that's what Ephraim means. Ephraim means double fruit. Ephraim was the younger of the two, Manasseh being the older, and Jacob, even when he was handing out the blessings, Genesis chapter 48 and 49, he said that Ephraim, Manasseh would be great, but Ephraim would always be greater, and the older brother would serve the younger. And indeed, we're going to see that Ephraim is the standard bearer for this particular camp. And, there's a spiritual war coming. We're going to stop there for today in the numberings. But there's a spiritual war coming. God's counting up the troops here, and who can He count on as they enter the promised land? And let me ask you this. Can He count on you as we prepare to enter the promised land? And I'm talking about the eternity. There's a spiritual war coming, and I hope that you are standing in place with that gospel armor on. I know He can count on you if you're one of His elect, because He could count on you in the first earth age. And you have a destiny. You've known that there's always been more than what you were taught in God's Word. And now that you know His truth, you're ready to stand with Him as we prepare to enter the promised land. Some of this is, pretty tough plowing. I'll admit that, but it's worth the effort. So stick with me as we work our way through this book of Numbers. I think you're going to enjoy it.